That's very dark. That's extremely dark.
That comes to my mind.
Oh God, that's horrifying. Perfect.
Hopefully,
All right. Okay, so hi, welcome everybody. This is Bummin Out with James, episode 4, and I am here today with a dear friend and colleague and erstwhile collaborator, once and future and also present collaborator, Proshot Kalami from Bunker Hill Community College, who I'm so excited to have here. Hello, Proshot. Good morning.
Good morning. Very happy to be here and very happy to be able to have this conversation with you.
Wonderful. So we know each other from being colleagues at Bunker Hill and having taught together, and um, I mean, I could go into the I know I feel like in our many conversations I've gotten kind of the tip of the iceberg of your life, and every time I see a little bit more, I'm like, whoa, what's that? And it's crazy. I sort of wanted to dig into that a little bit today. So we've only ever really we always collaborate on very proximate things, working on a class, and so we have to But I want to know where you in essence, like intellectually and philosophically, where you come from. So could you sort of walk us through the major, I suppose, like influence moments in your life, the sort of people and experiences and schools of thought, philosophies, which have shaped you in different ways over time, going all the way back?
Mhm. It's very difficult actually to talk about all of that, but at the same time, it's pretty exciting. Um, I have to think of myself as three or four people living at the same time in one person.
Mm.
Because I always make this joke, but this is true and it's real. I have many lovers, you know, and I can't do without one. I have to be with all of them to feel whole, as it were. But because of practicalities, literally, because of what life dictates you in terms of how to survive and how to continue being living, there are moments of time that you give priority to one simply because of the condition, and the others take a back seat. And gradually, when opportunities come, um, they take priorities. So based on that, I think the most logical thing for me to do is to go linear. um, as a child growing up learning reading, um, a few years ahead of my time, made me exposed to a world that was adult and what was not mine, but I got a peep into it, and it got me get very curious. And I remember the very first images that stays with me are two film posters and and a book on Homo sapiens.
Like a biology book, or like?
No, it was a combination of, it was one of those, it wasn't a graphic sort of graphic style book, but it had a lot of pictures, and it meant to give you some sort of introduction to archaeology slash anthropology, that sort of a thing. And it had a journey of how Homo erectus became Homo sapiens in a very simplistic way. The pictures were amazing. And every time I think about my early childhood, the film posters and that book stands out. And the third thing that came a little bit later was the piano that my mom had bought for me when I was like 2 years old, and I couldn't even sit behind it. Um, so that white piano, these archaeological sort of early human things, and the film posters, and in a funny way, they became who I am later on in my life. Isn't it amazing? When I think back, I go like, gee, wow, what do we do with children? Um, and how do they affect? Because I became a film scholar, I became a musician, and I became terribly involved into um, human history in terms of the early empires, ancient world, and antiquity.
That's so
And
strange.
I
That's awesome.
know, isn't it? It's just like so odd.
Were the film post? What were the film posters? Do you remember?
Yes, totally. One of them was the Diaz, which was an Iranian film, um, and though the male actor at that time, I didn't know who the hell that person was, looked very scary, and his image stayed with me, and also the head of a deer in the shadow. Later on, as an adult, when I watched that film, it's one of the best films of the Iranian film history, literally, the Diaz.
The
Um,
Deers. And what was the other one?
um, oh my God. The other one is a particular genre, again, of Iranian films, the genre called film Farsi, which is basically based on Lumpanism and a sort of a Robin Hood chivalry type of thing. Um, and the name of the guy is Caesar, and Caesar is like a gang member who is a very cool guy and who's very decent, and he has these, sort of New York chapeau hat sort of thing, and he was on the poster. His face, his hat, the way he's standing like this was on the poster. He wasn't scary. Apparently, he was supposed to be scary. To me, he was just like, "You're so darn handsome." Um,
So this is quite interesting. So you sort of from a very early age have this sense of being pulled in different directions. I mean, or is that something which is to what extent is that a construction in hindsight, or like when you were growing up, did it also feel like you were kind of living multiple lives?
I didn't know these were the influencing factors in my life, to be honest with you. I was quite unaware. But perhaps when I was 14, 15, 16, I realized that uh, I have hard time dividing myself between things that I love.
I so relate to that. I mean,
Yeah.
we were both kind of always going doing a thousand things at once, out of what feels like necessity. So I mean, if we roll time forward a bit, then so when I suppose because we both straddle the world between um, like being educators, being academics, I'm kind of fascinated by people's process of coming to intellectualize those things. So I mean, because I would imagine I think there's quite a difference between having an interest in even just taking the arts, having an interest in the arts that is that of a practitioner versus that of an academic, and you've sort of arrived at both uh, in equal measure. So I mean, when does that start to happen? Like when do you begin to approach these interests from both ways, or is it one first and then the other?
Um, I don't know, to be honest with you. That's a very good question. I was forced to take piano lesson when I was four going five, and I hated it. Um, but then I loved it so much so that when my mom wanted to punish me, she would say, "This week I won't take you to your piano lessons if you don't do this." And that was like the biggest punishment for me. Uh, it was mortifying to feel like I'm not going to go to my piano lesson. So I would do anything for that to happen. But at the same time, I remember I was very young. I was, I think, 9 years old. We were supposed to present. It was a group project, and I was supposed to do some research on a particular part of our presentation. It was about a particular king, pre-Islamic king in Iran. My mom taught me how to do research and how to look into different sources. That was the very first time I realized that if you want to talk about a subject, you have to read and consult different sources. And she taught me how to do that. And then I grew up using that model quite unconsciously, thinking, well, that's the only solid way of talking about anything. I need to read at least two sources and then either repeat them, because I didn't know what is analytical way of approaching a text and having a critique of it. I would just repeat whatever I've learned, but I would pick and choose things that I liked more. So there's prejudice in it as well. But at the same time, art was a part of my life. I couldn't imagine that I cannot play the piano, I cannot listen to the music, I cannot. Ugh, I put to ballet dancing and I hated it. Oh my God, I hated it. And we quit. I quit. It was traumatizing. Um, but I danced constantly. And I remember I performed for opening acts of, school stuff. Um, so dancing, music, and doing research, writing became something quite essential in my life. But I always thought I'm very dumb. I really, so there's a reason for it. Um, I was put into a particular institution. It was called Elite School of Exceptionally Intelligent Students. That even the title was handful of a thing. So we were supposed to go through like three different sets of IQ test and placement, and at the age of 4.5, 5, we would start school. So by the time I finished one, two, three, four, five, sixth, seventh grade, I had the knowledge of a high school diploma and a little bit more. Um, and my peers were people like me, and among them, I felt I'm very dumb. Um, I felt I'm really, really bad because my notation in writing music was bad. Whenever I wanted to write, I had many spelling errors in 2 or 3 languages. And I thought, you know, this is who I am. And I have to work very hard. It was only during the time that I was writing my PhD dissertation that I found out that I'm dyslexic severely.
Right. That's quite late in life to
I know,
be able to make adjustments accordingly,
I
right?
know.
Lord, this is actually because I mean I have something of a experientially similar thing, although coming from a different set of circumstances, because I was in a like a pretty sort of high achieving sort of school district, but I was a very poor student. Um, but the
So you
result.
know how I feel.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose it's the relative part of it, right? But I mean, I actually that is fascinating to me because there is I mean, it's such a deeply felt thing to feel intellectually inadequate as a young person. I mean,
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of ways one could feel inadequate, and I think it's something that's just I don't want to say universal, but I'm sure that at various points, all children experience that kind of exclusionary feeling of not measuring up in some way. But I'm really fascinated by other people who have experienced that sense of not measuring up intellectually because,
Mhm.
um, I mean, for me personally, I feel like my entire life is just a reaction against like a bad feeling that I had when I was like 10, and not in like a psychoanalysis. I mean, I like quite consciously. I feel like I've always been fighting back against um, being in a remedial reading class and being in remedial math classes and like just
Yeah,
being really poor, really poor student.
yeah,
Um,
I know.
and I mean, so I don't know. Is that something like? Is that a dynamic that is the like? Yeah. Does that dynamic show up elsewhere in your life later on, like sort of an attempt to, like, I suppose proving your earlier self wrong, of sort of establishing yourself and um,
Maybe, maybe more unconsciously than consciously, but you catch yourself sometimes thinking, what am I trying to prove here?
hmm.
Um, I never thought about it actively in that sense, and I don't know, it might be something cultural. um, like you have to be humble, and you have to accept, and you have to fight your way through.
Mm,
And whatever you achieve is something that you do. For other people may call it achievement, but for you is something you do.
mm.
um, that sort of, um, other people call it humility. I can't call it humility because I don't feel humble, but other people may have these sort of suggestions. It's very funny. Yesterday I was having a conversation with my mom, and told her that, Mommy, did you know that people in Xinjiang, China, in the Uyghurs of China, read my poetry? And she said, well, they read other people's poetry as well.
That's priceless mom comment. I love that.
I know. So,
So that, I mean, that's kind of telling, I suppose, then of how you had to. So you do. I mean, yeah, that's really fascinating. I feel like I I've only ever understood. I mean, this is it's dark to admit, but I think I've only ever really understood um, a kind of satisfaction with one's own production as like through the lens of consumption, which like does feel like a kind of I mean, it's not like a uniquely American thing, but it is something which, like, it is from a very, very young age, sort of what I felt draped in, right? That I mean, I remember even when I was in sixth grade, I wanted to prove, I was like sort of tired of being a fool, and I wanted to appear
yeah.
intelligent. And I used to check out these big red. This is very embarrassing. But I used to check out these big red like nature reference books from the library, and for a period of time I would just carry them around, and, and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm reading these. Yeah, I'm reading these," and and a lot of like that the sort of like appearance of I mean even now as I'm sort of like juggling like the life calculus of what it would what sacrifice it would take to pursue a doctorate, like it's the kid with the books is very much like still in me somewhere, like rummaging around and being like so I don't know, it's a horrible thing to admit, but this is sort of what it is. What you're describing sounds very different, but also growing up in that kind of environment sounds like, I mean, it sounds like it'd be very stressful, like to have to.
You don't think about it as a stress, because this is a rhythm of your life from the moment you know your life.
Mm.
This is not something that happens now, today, suddenly, all of a sudden. When you have been with it, it is something that you have adjusted to. But when in your adult life, sometimes you do something in the world which is a combination of a lot of people with a lot of reactions, and things go not exactly the way you expected it. I'm not saying always bad, but out of your expectations or calculations, you go like, what did I do? What happened? What did just happen? And that's when you realize that, oh, maybe I messed up somewhere. And that becomes the moment of realization. And that's the moment when you go back and look at your life and realize things that were a natural rhythm of your life are actually stressful reasons, are maybe harmful, maybe a good survival technique. That's when you go back and judge these informing elements with a different vision and a different understanding. One thing I have to add here is that things become a little bit more complicated for me, because I lived and grew up in four different cultures and countries for a good chunk of my life. And I cannot um, claim that I'm specifically this person and I'm specifically that person. Mm, One carries the residual of all of these cultures that you live in when you particularly live and experience the life in these different environments. And then you carry different visions and different perspective. Um,
Well, for our watchers, what is this particular sort of um, cultural conjuncture that you're sitting in?
so I'm a Persian, yes. Um, I'm born um, into this culture. Right now, when I interact with other Iranians, I feel like, what is happening? Why are you guys doing this? Somebody tell me what's going on. And that happens more than I would like it to happen. But at the same time, um, I'm innately Iranian in terms of my heritage and my culture, um, and some of the cultural habits. Like, I cannot take pride in stuff that I've done. The moment I feel proud, I go like, "Shut up! That's wrong. That is not the right thing to do." Um, Go figure. You don't know where culture pops up. It happens. At the same time, a huge part of my approach towards life is painted, or it's informed through the prism of a British um, landscape towards life. I cannot deny that. Whether I like it or not, I can have a critique of it. I can decolonize it, but I cannot deny its existence. Um, Having part of my education in America and working quite a bit in America and being embedded in American culture has also informed my perception of social life, um, and comforts of life as well, in a different way, which is in is in contrast to the British attitude towards life. Sometimes, it's different. And then, because of my family and the class and culture that I'm raised in and all that, there is a part of me that is so badly Europeanized in a way that I don't know how it happens. I can't get rid of it. um, it comes out in my appearance or in my attitude in my life. Like, everybody tells me you're so foreign, and I'm like, can you define it? Can you locate it?
You mean like specifically with other Iranian people, or like
Iranian colleagues,
yeah?
friends.
And that would just is there what's the dynamic there in terms of like people who are in Iran now and have like largely never left versus the kind of diaspora? Like, is there do you feel that kind of distance from other diaspora Iranian people?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Diaspora in general is its own animal. Um, when I observe other diasporic cultures, I also see that, for instance, if a family has left 15 years ago, a part of that time in 15 years ago is still a living thing with them. The culture they left is already evolved and moved, has gone somewhere else, but they are stuck in that time machine, and they keep repeating it in an abnormal way. We all do that, and I think it's because of a sense of belonging that the culture of diaspora mandates. Um, you have to really be very strong and have worked on yourself to be able to recognize it, erase it, um, and the figure out and understand that this is a loop that's not healthy. And maybe reconnecting with that culture allows you to put perspective, or completely get rid of it and tell yourself that this is not my raison d'etre. I look for something else in my life to feel whole. That's true about any diasporic community. In Iranian is the same thing. Um, and I don't react very well to those loops. I'm not kind when I'm um, faced with those loops, and I um, stay away. Um,
I'm curious because this is brain's going in a lot of different directions, but I mean now I'm sort of I suppose circling back to the original prompt, thinking about you kind of like growing up in Iran and then being educated in different places, and also I know you worked in Britain and worked in Germany, and of course worked in the United States. So, um, and so I guess what are the who are the thinkers who have been most influential for you in your life as an academic and as an artist, like thinkers and artists. But I guess I'm curious because
German,
really, yeah.
yeah, French and German. People who really shaped my ideology early on in life were French and German philosophers and thinkers. Um, and I have a huge affinity towards people like Merleau-Ponty, Derrida. Obviously, I was obsessed with him for a good chunk of my life. Um, um, I don't know. There is this particular. I have my own critique about it. There's a good chunk of colonial power behind all of these thoughts that I'm aware of, and sometimes I recognize how white supremacy informs some of the ideas and some of the ways of looking at life. But at the same time, I find close affinity, like Francois Lyotard. There is not a single moment in my interaction with life, and I'm not exaggerating, that uh, a hint of the analytics of the sublime of Lyotard doesn't have anything to do. It's there. Um, so, when these sorts of things become a part of your life, like a second nature, you pause and question why I feel so particularly close to these people. And German psychologists and sociologists and psychoanalysts attracted me quite meaningfully and deeply. Um,
Was
if
that at the same time, or was that were those like kind of because I mean part of my interest here is I'm really fascinated by sequence, because it seems to me that like you can have people who are influenced by a series of people, but in a way a series of different thinkers, but in a way like the order in which you come to them and the circumstances shapes how you use them, what they mean to you. But I'm sort of I notice in talking to people, there are some folks who seem like they were really influenced by a set of thinkers when they were like 25 or something, and then that kind of like shapes everything. But then with academics who are kind of always engaged in this kind of work, there might be a more actually I don't know, I don't want to draw that distinction, but yeah, I'm interested in like also how these different influences are interacting with one another. So would you say like I mean like I guess when did you when was Derrida really like influential for you and
17,
yeah.
16, 17, I was blown away by him. Uh, Derrida stayed with me for a few years after his death, um, and never left me. Now I have some critique about some of the stuff. I'm less naive about my love towards him, but I was enamored. And Derrida took me to Lacan. Um, Lacan, I stay away from in a very, I keep a healthy distance, but I acknowledge how fundamental he is. Um, Both of them led me to Merleau-Ponty. At the same time, um, Lyotard popped up and Lyotard stayed. And Merleau-Ponty took me to Jean-Luc Nancy. Nancy, I love. He's an amazing man. I love him. And I think I love his work because I fell in love with him as a character, and he was so sweet and nice. Um, I have issues with some of his arguments, but those are valid and very good issues that every time I find myself wrestling with him, I see growth. Um, so I would say that Derrida started this journey for me. And then you were talking about sequence. If we can put them in sequence, this is how these circles are looping and coming back and evolving and going somewhere else. But at the same time, I was very, very young, very young. I can't remember how old, maybe 10. I read, don't judge me, I read Thus Spake Zarathustra. I didn't understand a word of it. I fell in love with it.
You're 10.
I was, I had no idea what the hell was going on. I loved him. I loved the name. I was fascinated by many alphabets that are in the name, and I can't list them. These are a 10-year-old uh, fascination with the way a name is even written. Um, I didn't touch it. I read it again I read it again right before 9/11. So that's a huge gap, isn't it?
Yeah, and all. I mean, was it like? Was it that? That's. I just. I'm having. That's. It's such a strange text to have. So what was it like coming back just before 9/11?
Um, Mainly because I sat in a, I didn't take it, I sat in a course of German philosophers, and the professor said something about German philosophers that I didn't like,
Mm-hmm.
and I disagreed. But I was very young. I didn't dare to tell her that I'm sorry, but I think you're talking nonsense. I should have, but I couldn't. So to educate myself to make sure that what she's saying is actually doesn't make sense, I went back and started reading Nietzsche.
Mm.
Um, and this is a funny story. Um, a part of it stayed with me, the spectacle. Um, and the rest, I thought, why I always liked Nietzsche without any reason. This is just infantile. This is horrible. I should have read it. I should have gone and reread all of these things many, many times. I don't like this man. This man is crazy. What is happening? Um, and I hated myself for hating him because I stayed so faithful to him. Anyway, 9/11 happened. We had a seminar. In that seminar, I talked about the spectacle and what Nietzsche is saying. And then suddenly everything made sense. And then somehow I found out why I disliked Nietzsche. Um, because there is something horrifying, there is a horrifying truth in him, um, that speaks to the demented desire of being seen, um, that I think the event of 9/11 achieved, and that put my thought in a whole different, on a different, universe.
Was that an important moment into like in general intellectually for you? Was it like a sort of a reframing moment?
Yeah, it was. It's
In,
very.
in what other sense is that the case? I mean, I was only 11 at the time, so I don't. It was something which was important, but obviously it doesn't like. I can't like not in an intellectual way. I'd be interested like um, because it's talked about by older people as something that would like even people who were like my older sister who was just a few years older than me, but it's like it's kind of like a rupture moment, right? So I mean, is that what was your experience there? Also, where were you at the time?
I got a grant to finish my research for PhD 2 months before, 3 months before. uh, No, I'm lying. I went back in April. Um, to do my research. A part of my dissertation was related to French post-war films, and a part of it was for the Iranian post-revolution films. I was focused on trauma, how trauma informs the aesthetic choices that a filmmaker does as a traumatic artist, as a traumatized artist visualizing a traumatic subject. So I was in France doing my research, went to Iran, 9/11 happened. And that was the last time I was there. After that, I never returned because I went there for research, basically. And then I came back. I remember um, the television was on. I had a tray of tea. I had guests. So I just brought tea from the kitchen to the living room. Suddenly, there was a breaking news, and an airplane went right into the first tower, and the tray fell from my hand. And I could not think about people. To be honest with you, the first few seconds, I only thought, that building, that architecture, oh my God, the reason. Um, 11 years before that, I wrote four segment programs for radio on aesthetics and urban aesthetic. And one of the philosophy of visual philosophy in urban structure and aesthetics in architecture. And of course, I used Derrida for it as well. And one of the buildings that I wrote on was the Twin Towers. So I wrote on its structure and architecture and everything, and it was with me. And I had a love and hate relationship with the Twin Towers. Um, I didn't find them beautiful, but I found them magnificent. And thinking about this and how difficult it is, especially with the bedrocks of New York and everything, all of that. And when the tray fell, I thought, all that, oh my God. And the architect had passed just a few years before that. And I thought, thank God he's not alive to see that his work, his babies are being ruined. In a flash, in an epsilon of a second, when that thought passed, I thought, how many people are in there? What has happened? So time froze, and I don't know what happened. I felt like the world is watching this, and suddenly felt like all of us have been grabbed and taken by force into this auditorium to watch a play we do not want to watch, a play that is directed so well and so impactful, yet the horrors of it is so immense that I don't want to be witness to it. And I was forced to be witness to it, and I was angry. Um, and suddenly Nietzsche made sense. The spectacle of life and everything made so much sense. Um, I was supposed to fly back home. I was living in Berkeley at that time. Um, 5 days after that, the flights were cancelled, so I was trapped. I didn't know what's happening. And during those times, I realized that now it's the best time for discrimination. And I'm living in a country that has camps history and the anti-Chinese Act history and um, all the Native American um, I call them concentration camps, to be honest with you. I know it might be politically wrong to say that. I'm living in a country that's famous for this. Let's see what's going to happen now, next. And it happened, lo and behold. George Bush took advantage of it to create this homeland security scare and all that. And life changed. Life has greatly changed post 9/11. It's not what it was.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of remarkable your take on this is very interesting. I've never, I guess I haven't had a chance I never thought, I certainly never thought about it from an architecture standpoint. That's really fascinating. But I mean, this is, it's kind of incredible you were in Iran when this happened. So, and the fact that this is a breaking point where you haven't returned, is that like a matter of, like, tell me about that, the
There was no need for me to go back. I mean, I went there for research and did my research and came back. And things were not very welcoming. I mean, when I went to different archives and all that, I had to go through so many. Um, um, it was like going through the dark ages of bureaucracy. Who wants
Mm,
to do that? And I like, hold on to whatever you have. I don't give a damn. I do my own work outside, which I did.
mm.
So there was no need to go beg people who are not willing to work with you.
Right, right. Your life is so wild. I don't even. It's so it's funny that I feel like you scratch a little bit and there's just a lot in there. It would take 1,000 interviews to get everything that I want, and we will. But I guess I mean to sort of conclude a kind of wrap up question for what feel it never feels talking with you, it never feels like a completed session. It's always like we're just,
I have the same feeling about you, James,
Okay.
darling.
So I guess uh, to stay on, because I don't know, I'm really obsessed about thinking about artist practitioners, whatever, and academics. What are there any sort of um, like philosophical or practical artistic knots which you find yourself still very actively untangling in present, that are things that have stuck with you for a long time? Like, are there sort of, I guess, like what, like this doesn't have to be the encompassing thing, but does that trigger any memories or any sort of like associations, like something which you've been working through for a long time, which is continues to be generative and interesting to think about and to work on?
That's a massive question, darling. Um, really, I can. Oh, the best way I can address that is belonging. Um, the sense of belonging has been um, the fuel, the motivation, and informing factor, and literally the ground on which I stand for both my research and practice and artistic creation. Um, Funnily enough, one of the articles that I've recently written, is going to come out in a few months, from Berlin, is about finding a sense of belonging um, when three cultures are meeting in a space that cannot be defined. Um, the the most recent play that I wrote, we had a symposium on it few weeks back. It's very funny. One of the audience members who was there had not seen my work for about, say, since 2012. And after the show, she said, "It's interesting. In your poetry, in your plays, and in your painting, the theme of belonging and loss stays so true." And she started talking to me about the way she connects with this whole idea of loss, which makes me, after what she said, I realized that yes, it is true. um, my my academic books are looking at the subjects from the prism of loss. So loss and belonging are always, um, whether I want it or not, um, something that binds all my activities sort of together, and certain, I don't think I can get rid of it.
Yeah, that's the big one.
Yeah. I
Whoa.
don't know if I answered your question, but
No,
that's
you
what came to my mind.
absolutely, and actually that particular entanglement is Yeah, that's oh, I'm gonna try and labor a metaphor here. That's uh, that is a bit of gum from which the flavor never fully leaves.
Bravo.
Uh,
Bravo.
well, look, I'll tell you, I really appreciate you being here and talking to me on your Sunday, and it's just such a pleasure. And I look forward to continuing to. I mean, working together forever, but also hopefully having you back at some point. We can do some deep dives and whatever. But it's great to talk to you. You're the best.
It's a
So.
pleasure. I was honored that you asked. It's really a pleasure. I wish I could do the same thing to you one day and just grab you and have you sit and answer all my questions because you are, I mean, every time I see you or we talk, something opens up a new window, and I'm like, okay, how much time do I
We're gonna have to I don't know have like a stint in prison from not from a nonviolent demonstration or something. And and then we'll work it all out. So
definitely.
but I'll tell you, it's a real pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. We're going to be teaching another class in couple
Yeah,
weeks. So
pretty soon, yeah.
but enjoy the rest of your day, and I'm gonna say it's over, and then I'm gonna cut it in the edit.
Perfect. Great. It was a pleasure.